Hello and welcome to BookPage Live. I'm Kat Acree, an editor at BookPage, where we connect readers with their next great book. And I'm immensely delighted to be joined today by Elin Hilderbrand, the extremely beloved and prolific author of, I think, 27 novels. And she's a graduate of Johns Hopkins and the Iowa Writers Workshop, and she sets all of her novels with all of their summertime feelings on Nantucket, where she lives and where she is coming to us right now. So thank you so much for being here with us today. It's just so wonderful to see you.
Thank you, Kat. I'm excited.
So today we're talking obviously about your new summer novel, Golden Girl, which we included in our June issues selection of the year's best summer reading. So first, I have to say that this is a really audacious setup for a novel. I just want to go ahead and talk about that. It's about a woman named Vivi, who is a famous author who writes about Nantucket and has even written a book titled Golden Girl. But she narrates the majority of this novel from the beyond, and that's not a spoiler. She is killed in the first few pages. So in this immediate afterlife, Vivi is able to watch down over her friends and family through like a viewing window, giving little nudges at just the right moments, while also remembering moments from her past and grieving everything that she's left behind. It's just unlike anything else that I have read, I think maybe ever, but certainly this year it really stood out as a totally unexpected but still true beach read. So I want to ask you very broadly, what was the writing of this novel like for you? I have to assume that something this intimate, there was a lot of work there, a lot of maybe significant work that you had to do in the writing of this novel.
I can't, what's so funny is I can't remember a novel coming as easily as this one did, honestly. And I'm
Wow.
not sure if it's because I used so much of my own life. It was really great because obviously I understood Vivi pretty well, being a novelist myself and having young adult children myself. Those two things in place, though, we aren't really that much alike. She's way, way cooler than I am. And that was by design. I wanted her just to be the coolest person anybody ever knew. And I wanted her death to be a real loss. Um, and her background is vastly, vastly different from my own. And the way she gets to Nantucket, like everything about her is different, but at the same time, like we share like at base, these two things. One is that we're novelists, and two is that we have these, we're at the point in our life where we have these young adult children. She's a single mother and I am as well. So mining that kind of stuff, it was really fun because then I could just be like, okay, how would I want, how do I want my life to, what do I want my life to look like? And so I have to say, like the writing of this book was probably the most fluid of my 27 books.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because as much as there was a lot about, reading this book was like really emotional for me. And, I'm not even a parent, but it was just, you just nailed these like really intimate moments, but there's also so much humor. And it's kind of tremendously fun to read, even though you're reading about this huge loss. And I have to say that it's really not often that I come across a story in which the author is delighting so much in their role as this overseer of the events within the worlds they create. And it felt like a stroke of genius that you connected the idea of an author watching over her characters with the hope of someone that we love watching over us after they're gone. Is this something that you've been thinking about for a long time, this kind of overlap between omniscient perspectives?
Well, I mean, okay. So just to go back, this is my 27th book and I strive to do something different. Like I live in mortal fear of like repeating myself or doing the same thing. I always say my job is so difficult because I have to do exactly the same thing every year completely differently. And so I wanted an omniscient narrator. I wanted one so badly. And I wanted to play with the form and be like, how can I make this different in form? So yeah, so I was really, really interested in Vivi as like somebody who could see all, but also like tongue in cheek, because of course she's the novelist. So it's almost like she's not writing what's happening, but she's aware that she's watching it like an omniscient narrator would. And as far as like the stuff in the beyond goes, I mean, I lost my father at like the tender age of 16. He was killed suddenly in a plane crash. Horrible, horrible loss. And I've always felt like he's been watching me, and maybe I haven't always felt that, but I felt that since I've had my own kids. I realized, like, once you have your own kids, you realize like this unbelievable bond between parent and child, and that he must have been watching me all this time. And then I thought, well, no one's going to tell me I'm wrong. And because this is fiction and the world can go exactly the way I want it to, I'm going to have the beyond look like this. And I'm going to have Vivi in her green room, in her boho chic green room, watching what happens. And like this great partner for her or foil for her in Martha, who's her administrator. And I'm just going to make this world mine.
I feel like you're getting I love that you used the word play. I feel like you're getting at the heart of what fiction so often is, which is like, it could be kind of a playground for ideas and dreams, and in many cases, like an excuse to pry open the box and find a bunch of secrets. And this novel is like acknowledging your presence in that process in a really, really cool way.
Thank you. I mean, you're the only person that's really said that to me, but it was very intentional. Like and I'm going to say this, you can probably only do it once you've written 27 novels and you really understand fiction and how it works and what you can do and what you can't do and how you make something like this work. It's not something I would have done in my first book because I just didn't know how. But after, doing all these different things with my fiction, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to try this. And it is like a little bit of an inside joke.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And there's inside jokes all throughout the book. Some of my favorite parts of the book are these little just moments when I don't know, you're making fun of the writer life, or just like the world of being an author. And like, okay, one of my favorite moments is there's a Facebook memorial page for Vivi. And there's all these people that are writing their comments about how much they miss her and love her. And then there's one person that's like, oh, she's going to be so missed, but why isn't anyone fixing that typo on page 36 of such and such novel? It's just like, people on the internet.
You're the only person that's mentioned that. That is like my favorite part. In fact, I really had a whole bunch of stuff. Like that was in my first draft. I had a lot of Facebook stuff, and the Facebook fans come to the funeral. And I mean, my editor made me cut it back. She's like, you're just going nuts. But it was so much fun to be able to like take the things about being a writer that I find so frustrating. You can write the world's best book, but if you have a typo on page 201, every single person is going to write and tell you about it. And years later, like nobody else has caught it. And so, I just found it, and I know that people do it in earnest, and I do appreciate the input, but it's, at times it's just like, okay, I wanted to be able to, I wanted to be able to spoof it.
Yes.
I just thought it was so rich.
So because there's all these like little jokes that are like, I mean, Vivi has such a wonderful attitude about the whole experience. Like, and yes, we're seeing her children who some are grown, some are kind of adolescent. They have grief, and they're lost, and they're confused, and they need her. But the novel feels buoyant because of Vivi, because she's just she's got this infectious, great attitude. Never once does this novel about the death of a mother become maudlin. And I wanted to know your thoughts on that. Is that something it seems like that's how you kind of naturally approach such topics?
Well, I mean, I didn't want it to be I didn't want it to be a sad book. I wanted it to be a hopeful book. And I wanted it because I was a person that lost somebody extremely dear to me when I was a young person. I wanted it to give hope to people and it's everybody, right? It's almost every adult has lost someone before their time. And a lot of us have lost someone very important before their time. And it's for those people to be like, you know what? We're all going to die. We can say that with certainty. We're all going to die. And so and in fact, when I was in Iowa, I think someone said that writers write because they're afraid to die. And I think maybe it was that line that sort of stuck in my head, and that maybe was the seed. Like, I'm afraid to die. Everyone's afraid to die. But what if it's actually not that bad? What if I, as the mother of 3, young adult children, can just sit up there and move them like chess pieces, and how fun that would be, and how hopeful it would feel, so that it's not like the end, but it's really a beginning.
Yes. And this is why people come to your books for comfort, because, you have chosen to try out a perspective that is hopeful and is fun and is not the worst case scenario.
Right.
I want to talk about if there's anything like unfair in the book that the book focuses on, it's parts of the investigation of Vivi's death. So there's a young Black teenager. I guess he's about to go to college, so he's not.
Yeah, he's 18.
But yeah, Black boy, and he's like essentially like a son to Vivi, just like really close with her son, and just part of the family. But because of where he was when she, I don't know if we've said this, but she's struck and hit by a car, and they don't know who. It's a hit and run, and so he's being investigated as the main suspect for quite a bit of the book, and we follow the police officer throughout much of this investigation. And there's this wonderful moment when he sits with discomfort, or he sits with his discomfort regarding his potential implicit bias against this young Black kid. And I just thought, what a wonderful thing to sit with our discomfort. And like I said, we come to your novels for comfort, but it's clear that the power of a moment of discomfort.
Yeah. And also, I wrote the book in the summer of 2020. And so it was very much, even in my own personal life, and I don't want to get into it too much, but my son's best friend, who is Black, lives with me and was living with me last summer. And so I was sort of parenting him a little bit differently from Vivi, because he actually lives here. And I did worry about him when he left the house in a different way that I worried about my own children. And the things that were happening in the summer of 2020 did affect the writing of this book. And I did want not to make, the book is not about race or the police, but to have a little bit of, to bring some reality to Nantucket. And, I wanted to point out just the way people deal with it. And the chief, and I wanted him to be woke. I wanted him to be a good guy, but I also wanted him to realize his own limitations, because that's what we all have to do. And that's what we especially all had to do last summer, was really think about things and our place in them, and where we stand.
So you were writing it during last summer, COVID, huge racial reckoning in America. And like you said, this is not a book about race or anything like that. It is about loss, grief, the messy relationships between people. And like I've said before, it is super fun to read and very funny. And I just want to understand a little bit better, how you get yourself into the summary frame of mind when you're living through a really difficult year, and finding ways to incorporate those lessons that you're exploring, but still keeping the book very light and fun and inviting and hopeful. I just wondered how you do that.
Well, one of the ways that I do it is to set it here on Nantucket. So I've learned by now the things that my readers really crave. So we all needed an escape. So last summer, we all really needed an escape. So I wanted to make sure that there was a lot of like beautiful scenery. So like there's this breakup scene, and I won't say anything more about it, but there's a breakup scene in the middle of the book. And I wanted it to take place like at this gorgeous beach with like these delicious sandwiches, like everything so Elin Hilderbrandized. And I wanted it to be so appealing. But of course, these two people are there to break up. And I just wanted the setting and the atmosphere to be really gorgeous and yummy and escapist, and then we can play the drama out. And that's true of all of my books, because they all are set on Nantucket. And so they do sort of have a baseline of, comfort and delight, but, serious things are always happening. So.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I really enjoyed following with Vivian was when she goes in these like trips down into her memories. She's kind of able to sort of almost time travel, and not just, she's able to flash back.
Yeah, she's able to flash back.
Yeah, and we see a really emotional side of a book tour for her. We really see, an early part of her career. It's kind of a difficult book tour. And we just learned that you've just come back from another whirlwind book tour. And I just want to know, like, how are you feeling touring this time? It sounds like it was super fun, but, were emotions high? I mean, you're.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's, first of all, so in the book, as you will find out when other people will find out when they read it, she has just gotten divorced, and she's in a really tender place with her kids. They and the ex-husband, who's sort of, it was pretty much his fault. He blames her. And then she goes away. So she goes away on an extremely long book tour, 29 days. I just got back from a 14-day book tour. A 29-day book tour at this point is absolutely unthinkable. 14 days in 14 different hotel rooms. And it's so funny. I was thinking of Vivi the entire time I was gone. I'm like, this is mentally exhausting, psychologically exhausting. You're not at home. So every day you check into a new hotel, and it's a new room, and it's a new space, and all of your stuff is in your suitcase. And then you have to get dressed and, get into a strange shower, and then get into a car and go to an event and meet strangers. And there's nothing familiar about anywhere that you go. Every once in a great while, I would see a reader that I knew, or somebody from my previous life every once in a great while, but it is very, very psychologically challenging to do this 14 days in a row. And I feel like some people think, oh my God, it would be so fun to go out and you're famous and everyone wants to see you. But it's, you're not eating, you're not exercising, you're not at home, you're not with your children. And especially her children at that point are young, and they miss her, and she misses the birthday party. And it's very difficult for her. It was extremely difficult for me, sort of physically and psychologically, even this time, although it was better because I hadn't done it yet last year. And so I really missed seeing my readers. And so, the 2 or 3 hours that I was signing was definitely the high point of the day. That was the raison d'etre, right? That's why I was there. And that felt good. But the rest of the day was like traveling, and it was soul shredding.
Yeah. But, it's interesting, from from us, the reader perspective, like, you are so far away from all that you know and love and are familiar with, but like, you are bringing something that we, the reader, knows and loves and is familiar with everywhere that you're going with you. It's such an interest. The book touring author it's just so interesting to me. So we've gotten very heavy. But I want to lighten it up ever so slightly. This is kind of a broad question, but I really would love to know, what is your personal definition of a beach read?
So I read very substantial. No, I'm going to take that back. I don't read substantial books. I read books that are more substantial than people might imagine. So I like the best book I can get my hands on. 2 examples that I've read recently that I have thought are so fabulous. And one I would qualify as a beach read, and one I probably wouldn't. So when I was on tour, I read The Plot by Jean Hanff Korelitz. She's the woman that wrote the book that The Undoing was based on. Okay. And she also wrote a book that I loved called Admissions. The Plot, in my opinion, is probably a perfect novel. I thought it was so ridiculously good. And it was so awesome for me to be a writer on book tour, to be reading about a writer, and it's about a writer who steals one of his students' plots and then becomes famous. I mean, it is so terrific. And her sentences are so beautiful. And I would call that a beach book, because you are turning the pages as fast as you can. It's got a little bit of a thriller aspect, but it's just so engrossing. And I feel like a beach read has to be something that you do not want to put down because there are so many ways to be distracted. The other book that I read this year that I thought was absolutely phenomenal was Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. Great Circle, one of the best books, definitely my top book of the year for sure. One of the best books I've read in recent times. Not a beach book because you really, it's long and, it has different sections and you really have to pay attention. And I would call that more of an indoor book.
Mhm.
So for me, like indoor books are the big books that you really should be reading indoors when you can concentrate, not a book that is so engrossing that you can take it out to the beach with you or the pool, if that makes sense to you.
Yes, and I agree. I'm totally obsessed with Great Circle, but I read it in like a weekend and I didn't care. If there was a beach, I wouldn't have cared about it.
Right.
It was just like, I'm gonna read this inside. And I love that you brought up the plot because it's audacious, like your book is audacious, where it's like,
Loved it.
just like, here's a brilliant book, I'm gonna tell you about it. And then the writes a book about another brilliant book. And I just love that kind of like, I don't know,
She
swagger.
knows what she's doing. I tell you what, she is one skilled writer. It was the overall structure, but it was also sentence to sentence. I don't think I've read a better book. Sentence to sentence, that book is one of the best I've ever read. And I kept saying to myself, go back and read this page. And I'm like marking just the way, just her sentence structure, she's a genius.
Do you have any like summertime books that you return to each year? Are you a ritual reader in any way?
I'm not, because I don't really have time. If you saw my stack, Kat, you would be, I'm in my study. My stack is up next to my bed. It's so big. I'm actually afraid at this point it's going to fall over. But I'm always like, what am I in the mood for? So I just finished a book by Amy Poppel called Musical Chairs, which was very light, extremely delightful. And that to me also is like a beach book because it's got a lot of surface energy. It moves along. It's told from different points of view, which I love because I do that myself. And now I'm reading, I just started today, Send for Me by Lauren Fox. So I'm like, I like to do something completely different. For me as a writer, reading is so important. Not every writer feels this way. I am constantly reading. And I feel like the only way to get better in my craft is to read other really good books. And that sort of feeds my imagination, but also, gets me excited and inspired.
I once talked to an author who said that they didn't read while they were writing because they didn't want it to affect their writing style. And I have since asked a couple authors about that, and the response has always been like, "How? I'm always reading. What do you mean I don't read while I'm writing?" Like very different, needs, I guess, as a writer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been just wonderful. I guess my last question is kind of silly. People are always declaring, like I've done this, declaring what kind of summer they're gonna have.
Yeah.
I feel like the original is like the hot girl summer, but since
Right.
then, there's just like people are always declaring their summer. So I want to know what you declare your summer to be. If you speak it, it will be true.
Okay. I'm having the summer of yes. I've already decided that. Like, I'm just going to say yes. And it may end up being a blur, but I'm just saying yes. I want to do it all. I want to go out. I'm going out to dinner shortly. I want to do it all because I missed it. It was very good for productivity. I'm not going to lie. Last summer was the best for productivity, but I missed everything. And so my summer is the summer of yes.
Well, I'm not going to keep you from it. So have a wonderful dinner. But thank you so much for speaking with us and for writing this wonderful book, and so that we can share it with our readers. And please go check out Golden Girl if you haven't already. And thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Kat. Bye. Bye, BookPage.